Yo, what's going on, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another video, and today we're going to talk for a bit about the play-in tournament. Right now, it's the fourth year of the play-in existing, which time seems to continue to fly faster than it ever has before, but it's only the third year of it in its current iteration where we have the 7 and 8 seeds facing off, the 9 and the 10 seeds facing off, to ultimately decide who ends up making the playoffs in those final two spots. And I remember when it was initially introduced, people were a bit skeptical of the idea because it was a massive change to a long-lasting format of the NBA regular season. However, me personally, I always loved the idea. I like the idea of continuously adding new ways that raise the stakes in the NBA, new games of consequence, and it was very different for the NBA to add like a one-game March Madness style tournament where if you want to show that you belong in the playoffs, just win this one game and you can go ahead and make the playoffs. Maybe you dealt with injuries over the course of the season that typically would cost you a playoff spot, but you're the 10 seed, so you've got a shot now. Maybe you're fully healthy and you can take down a squad in front of you to go ahead and maybe make a Cinderella run through the playoffs. It was a really interesting idea. I was a fan right from the get-go, and I feel like it's kind of delivered. Over the course of its short existence, we've gotten some pretty fun games like the Lakers and Warriors when they faced off in 2021. That was a classic. LeBron saying, I saw, 3-4 rims when he went ahead and shot after getting hit in the head. The Grizzlies beat the Warriors also that same year. We all thought Golden State was going to make it, but the Grizzlies beat them and really burst onto the scene, having a really tough first run series against the Utah Jazz. The following year, the New Orleans Pelicans did something similar, where they beat the Clippers to end up making it into the playoffs themselves, and they faced off against the Phoenix Suns in the first round, pushed them to 6 games, and if it weren't for Zion's injury, they would probably be towards the top of the Western Conference standings right now, once again announcing that, hey, we're a young team that's on the rise. It's something that we've seen time and time again. The Timberwolves-Clippers game also last year gave us one of the funniest NBA memes of all time, in my opinion, one of the greatest reaction videos ever in the history of social media. It's been a success in my opinion. But this season, more than ever, it feels like the play-in tournament is making a massive impact. So we haven't even seen the play-in games themselves yet. What I'm talking about is its impact on the end of the regular season, where in most years at this point in the year, we kind of know who's going to make the playoffs for the most part. There's a couple of seeding changes that can happen, and that's part of the excitement of it. Maybe a team that's sitting at the 10 spot could maybe sneak into an 8 or up to a 7. Stuff like that is the possibility at this point usually. But right now, the standings are all a jumbled mess. We're seeing who's going to make the play-in, who isn't, who's going to pass the play-in and make it up to like a 6 seed, a 5 seed, while some of those other teams that see themselves as championship contenders could potentially fall into the play-in tournament where we don't know what's going to happen. It's making everything feel way more fun. And a great example of this, at least for me personally, is a couple of nights ago when we faced off against the Clippers, the Thunder, that is. I forget that some of y'all don't know that I'm a Thunder fan. But we faced off against the Clippers, and that game had my heart racing, not only because we're in the mix of a playoff race, but because the Clippers are one of those teams that we're directly competing with. We're trying to make it out of the play-in tournament. They're trying to avoid being in the play-in tournament, and so it's really high stakes. It feels like a huge playoff atmosphere type game, which is amazing for the league. This is what we want to see in this home stretch of the regular season. This is partially due to the overall parity in the league at the moment, but I think most of it is attributed to the addition of the play-in tournament, which gives teams that otherwise may have felt like they had no chance to make the playoffs or that it was a long shot, now they feel like, hey, all we have to do is make it into this tournament, win a couple of games or one game, and boom, we are a playoff team, which many people didn't think we could be. And a great example of this is like the Indiana Pacers, who are a young team just looking to maybe get some playoff experience. In a typical season, they would have to catch up to the Atlanta Hawks, who are currently 3 games ahead of them in that 8 spot, but now, because of the play-in tournament, all they've got to do is catch the Bulls, who are 1.5 games ahead of them, and if they can do that, they win a couple games, boom, all of a sudden, they get some playoff experience for their young core of Tyrese Halliburton, Benedict Mathurin, and some other guys. It could be a huge experience for all of them. Another example is with the Miami Heat, who are currently the 7th seed in the Eastern Conference. Most years, they wouldn't be too worried. Sure, you want to be higher than this, and they would continue to try and push up to maybe like the 6th seed, which they're tied with the Nets for at the moment, but it probably wouldn't be too big of a concern. However, because of the play-in tournament right now, they would face off in a play-in game against the Atlanta Hawks, and while I do think the Miami Heat would probably win that game, you don't want to be in the play-in. You want to avoid it at all costs because you deal with one injury or someone gets sick or something happens and all of a sudden you lose a couple of games, you fall down a seed automatically, or you just miss the playoffs altogether, which would be a disaster scenario for the Heat. So they're going to do whatever they can, pull out all the stops to avoid that play-in tournament, pass the Brooklyn Nets, maybe even try to pass the Knicks, who are currently sitting at the 5 seed, a game and a half around ahead of them, they're going to do everything that they can, which once again is a huge win for the play-in, making it feel like every team has games of consequence at this point in the season. But the West is where the real action is taking place because it might be the closest conference that I have ever seen. I really don't think I've ever seen anything like this. The 4th seeded Phoenix Suns, who hope to be a championship contender and are some people's pick to make it out of the Western Conference when they get fully healthy and KD comes back, are currently 3 games ahead of the 13th seeded New Orleans Pelicans, who seem like they're on the ropes at the edge of the play-in tournament. There is such little room for error for every one of these teams. The play-in only amplifies these stakes. Like with the Suns, they're not only trying to maintain seeding, but they're trying to avoid a potential play-in game where maybe Kevin Durant isn't back yet or he's not fully healthy. You could potentially miss the playoffs, which would be a massive disaster. Or even like the Los Angeles Clippers, they're another team that has title hopes but is on the verge of maybe falling into the play-in tournament. The reigning champion Golden State Warriors are half a game ahead of the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Minnesota Timberwolves, on the verge of themselves falling into the play-in tournament. And they have lost 2 play-in games in previous years. That year, like we talked about earlier in the video, where they lost to the Los Angeles Lakers and then the Memphis Grizzlies. They know how brutal the play-in can be. They want to be nowhere near that, so the stakes have never been higher over the course of the season for those squads. If we go further down the list, right now at the 9 seed are the Dallas Mavericks, who were just a year ago in the Western Conference Finals. They've got Luka Doncic, they've just traded for Kyrie Irving, yet they're on the verge of having to play a play-in game. And if the season ended today, the Mavericks and the Lakers would face off in a play-in matchup. And if everybody's healthy, you would have Luka and Kyrie Irving versus LeBron and Anthony Davis in a 1-game match to decide whose season ends and who advances to the next round of the tournament. That is incredible basketball. Like, that is not only so great for the NBA themselves in terms of bringing in viewership and dollars, which they care about the most, but just as a basketball fan, the idea of seeing one of the greatest players of all time in LeBron James face off against his former teammate, his former championship teammate in Kyrie Irving, as well as one of the biggest stars of this new generation in Luka Doncic, who is a tried and tested playoff performer, like, that is basketball heaven to somebody like me. That would be so much fun, which is what the play-in tournament brings to the table. Never mind mentioning how a current 7-8 matchup between Minnesota and OKC would be so much fun. We would see 2 of the brightest young stars in the league in Gilgeous-Alexander and Anthony Edwards go up against each other in a game to decide who goes ahead and leads their team to the playoffs, which is a great opportunity for these young stars to be introduced to a whole new crop of fans who otherwise probably wouldn't watch a Timberwolves Thunder game. But if it's a 1-game elimination where it decides who makes the playoffs and who doesn't, or who has not yet to make the playoffs, they would still have to win another game. That's a great way to introduce so many new fans to these young players. To wrap everything up, there's a number that I want to point to y'all that really shows the impact of the play-in tournament itself. That number is 24, which is the number of teams right now that still have a shot, in my opinion, to make the play-in tournament. There are only 6 teams that I believe right now are kind of basically eliminated, and those squads are the Detroit Pistons, the Houston Rockets, the San Antonio Spurs, the Charlotte Hornets, the Orlando Magic, and the Portland Trailblazers. Every other squad still has a chance to make the play-in and therefore the playoffs. I mean, how often can we say something like that about the NBA? It's almost unprecedented. And you combine that with the fact that we get some massive games between stars that decide who makes the playoffs and who doesn't. Some of the league's young rising stars on one of the bigger stages with a chance to push their teams to the playoffs. How can you not say that the play-in tournament has been a massive success and is kind of saving the end of these regular seasons? And not to mention that all of this is happening in a year where the draft class is absolutely loaded. I mean, it's headlined by one of the greatest NBA prospects of all time in Victor Wembanyama. There's amazing talents like Scoot Henderson and Brandon Miller, amongst others. You would probably expect that this is a year that most teams would try and lose and avoid the play-in, avoid the playoffs, so they could secure one of these top prospects. And there are some teams, Pistons, Spurs, Rockets, for example, Hornets, that are doing this. But for the most part, most teams are trying to compete, like we talked about a little bit ago. I mean, Adam Silver, prior to the season, was basically begging teams not to tank. He was talking in press conferences prior to the year that we hope teams don't tank, and we've talked about relegation and this, that, the other thing is solutions to tanking, basically saying, guys, please don't tank. Please don't go for Victor. Please try and be competitive, which it maybe worked because teams are trying to be competitive, but I think it's in most part due to the addition, once again, of the play-in tournament. So overall, I think the play-in tournament has been a massive success of an addition. It should stay a staple of the NBA regular season, and it's just overall giving us one of the most competitive NBA seasons we've seen in some time. I do know that some people still don't like it, and if you're one of those people, comment down below letting me know why you don't like the play-in tournament, maybe what changes could be made for you to more be in favor of it. I think that would be some really interesting discourse. But yeah, with all that being said, I appreciate you all watching. Please leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of these videos. We're really close to 25K on this channel. We want to continue pushing towards that, so please leave a subscribe if you haven't already. Honestly, most people who watch these videos are not subscribed, which I know basically every YouTuber says, but it's true. So go ahead and hit that button. I would really appreciate it, especially because there's going to be a lot of fun content coming with the playoffs right around the corner that you don't want to miss out on. So yeah, that was my little spiel. But with all that being said, I appreciate y'all watching. I will see y'all later. Real one, safe back.